All right, welcome to episode 129. I think 129 of the Charm City Birdwatch podcast. We're here. It's a Tuesday. It's the 24th. The holiday spirit is upon us, sort of, but it's a short week this week and a crazy one at that for Ravens fans. And I'm here. Jake's here with me. He's back after a grueling week of finals. Jake is back with me, and I'm happy because I didn't want to have to break down all of the madness that has happened this week by myself. So thankful to have Jake back. But where to begin? I mean, there's so much to talk about with the game, but then everything that has happened since the end of the game is almost even more important and even more daunting. But I suppose we'll get to that at the end when we talk about this upcoming game that is looming very, very quickly, like right on the horizon, this Thursday night, Thanksgiving night at Pittsburgh. Season on the line again. I won't say too much. We'll get to it when we get to it. But to start, instant reaction to this game. I think I said coming in that this was a must-win game in a lot of ways, and really I don't think that was disputable. You look at the situation the Ravens were in. 3 games back of Pittsburgh already coming into this game. They're 4 games back now, I believe. So, you were pretty much out of the division race. Even though you still had this head-to-head with Pittsburgh, you look at the schedules for both teams. It's just 3 games is just too much to overcome. It's not impossible. Anything could happen, as we always like to say. But for all intents and purposes, the Steelers had wrapped up that division, or at least the Ravens were not in contention, because you never know. I don't know what the Browns are going to do, but I would assume as of now it's a safe bet to say that Pittsburgh has the AFC North wrapped up. So with that in mind, the Ravens look to the wild card, and the good news is there's an additional wild card team this year. So in theory, that should make it easier to make it into the postseason. I mean, how many years have we seen in recent history? Look at the Ravens in 2016, 2017, where they were scrapping and clawing, trying to make the postseason, and you're saying, well, 9 wins might do it as long as you beat the right people. And now this year, 9-7 is definitely not going to do it, even with the extra team. And I'm starting to look at certain matchups down the stretch and all these other contenders and who's in the hunt and their schedule. 10 wins might not even do it for some of these teams. It's pretty crazy how tightly contested this AFC playoff race is. But nonetheless, just like the Colts game a couple weeks ago, it would have been very, very important for the Ravens to have a head-to-head win against the Tennessee Titans, because one of those 2 teams is going to take that division. I don't know who. They've got their second head-to-head meeting coming up here, I believe, this coming week, if not the next. So their division's going to come down to the wire. One of those teams is going to win it. The other one's going to be a wild card team. Would have been nice to have a head-to-head, tiebreaker over both of them, but you only have one over the Colts now. So I guess I'm getting sort of trailing down this other pathway here. I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but it's almost like we should be rooting for the Titans to win that division now, just because the Ravens have the head-to-head advantage over the Colts when it comes to the wild card. There's so many weird things at play here. I guess when I say all that, my biggest takeaway is I never would have imagined that the Baltimore Ravens, with this team in 2020, would be at a point by Thanksgiving where we're freaking out about the record and we're counting potential wins on the remaining schedule. Oh, can we win this one and this one and this one? Can we get to 10 wins, maybe 11 wins? Is that going to be enough? Are we only going to be a 7 seed? It's just absolutely nuts right now. And, look, the Ravens lose this one in overtime. Surprisingly enough, first overtime meeting between the Ravens and Titans. These 2 teams have a lot of history together. The first time they played an overtime game, surprising enough, Ravens come out as the loser. 2 straight losses, 3 of their last 4. It's not looking good, Jake. And like I said, I don't think anyone would have expected the Ravens fan base to be in this position right now where we're having these conversations before the calendar even turns to December.
So, and here's the situation. The Ravens have lost two straight, and they're going into Thanksgiving on a 2-game losing streak on the road, in Pittsburgh, by the way, against the undefeated, Steelers team that hasn't lost yet this season. I know, yeah, now you have COVID in your facility and you're not going to have your top 2 running backs, especially after J.K. Dobbins had a breakout game in a lot of ways on Sunday against Tennessee and really handled the bulk of the carries there. So, Nolan, I'm not sure about you, but so on Thanksgiving, typically, I have Thanksgiving with my dad's family, and I wait a few days, like we'll wait until Friday or sometime over the weekend to eat with my mom because it times out better. Well, this year we're doing it a little bit differently, and I'm having 2 dinners in the same day. So not only do I have to worry about having 2 meals, but if I fall into a slumber after any of this, I might not be missing much because we're going into this game, on short rest with all the conditions that I just said, all the factors that we're going to get into here eventually. And yeah, it's tough to not start getting into this mindset where I understand the Ravens' last 5 games are very winnable, but I'm just looking at this and I'm seeing all the injuries. And yes, have they, gone on historic runs before like they did in 2012 after it wasn't looking good? Yeah, absolutely. But I'm just looking at everything with the injuries, seeing how there's teams on their schedule like the Browns that could very well give them a good fight. And I mean, even Dallas too, like that. Andy Dalton knows our defense. So like you're looking at this here, and it's hard to kind of escape this mindset of where, you don't want to lose all hope, but it's tough to kind of look at it right now when you look at it with everything going on and everything the team's facing. Now they can't even really hold. I mean, I don't really know what the extent of their in-person meetings is. I know they had Harbaugh's presser. He was in his office yesterday, but he said they were still having team meetings. The team was there. So really, they're just saying, screw it with COVID. This is the Thanksgiving primetime game. There's no way we're canceling this. We're just we're playing it no matter what. No matter how many men it takes, no matter how many people got to get called up from the practice squad, the NFL is going to let this game happen. It's crazy times, but yeah, I know that was kind of a multi-factored ramble there, but it's not pretty right now. It's not pretty.
You're absolutely right. But it's the situation we're in, and the Ravens are just dealing with it as it comes. I mean, you look at where they were a couple weeks ago. They had a little COVID outbreak when Marlon Humphrey tested positive, and you look at all the close contacts that were identified for him. More could be identified right now for these 2 positive tests for Dobbins and Ingram. But as of now, Brandon Williams is the only one that's been identified as a close contact, oddly enough. I don't know what constitutes the close contact. I'm sure they're wearing like those bracelets that track your vicinity to one another, and there's other things they can use to track that. But right now, and again, more could come, and I'm probably jinxing it, but I was thinking about this yesterday. For 2 players to test positive, this is a short week. You really can't afford to have this happen right now on a short week because the guys obviously aren't going to play. And then when you also think about that they're playing on a Thursday next week, the quarantine period is 10 days. That would bring them back, if everything goes according to plan for Dobbins and Ingram, Brandon Williams as well, or whoever else pops up here as a close contact, they're eligible to come back Wednesday of next week. So now you're thinking, well, I mean, for Brandon Williams in that case, if he's healthy, you let him go. He's a veteran. Probably same for Mark Ingram. He'll get some touches in that case. But for J.K. Dobbins as a rookie, you have to question, is he ready to go if he hasn't practiced in 2 weeks? I know it's Dallas and it's, an inferior opponent, but this is with the way the schedule is right now, this is a tough situation. And if they can make it through this without any more close contacts, I think you have to consider that a huge, relief, because it was like 7 defensive players were in a close contact with Marlon Humphrey, and they didn't practice all week. And luckily enough, they discovered that early enough in the week, and it was a Sunday game, so they were able to return for that game. But that was a nerve-wracking week. Who was going to be available, who wasn't, and it ended up working out okay for the Ravens. But this one, it could get dicey if any other close contacts are identified. As of right now, it's not good with the running back situation, but if it's just these three guys are confirmed ruled out, you can survive that. You can overcome that.
Exactly, because the two running backs they have now, they're not just picking up off the street. These are guys that have been on the roster and have game experience. Justice Hill obviously has been more special teams this year, but Gus Edwards can stay in his main role while still probably taking the bulk of the carries. And then you can have Justice Hill in there, who would otherwise not be playing any offensive snaps at all. So they at least have options for guys to take the carries as far as people in that room without Dobbins and Ingram.
Very much agreed there. And one last thing, we probably should have saved this for the end, but we're rolling. So Brandon Williams, I know a lot of people were really upset and disappointed to see that he was one of the close contacts. And I get that feeling because Brandon Williams is an essential part of this defense and anchoring that defensive line. Look, we all know the stats. We've seen them. The run defense with him versus without him, the numbers are staggering. So say no more. But Brandon Williams was a no-go this past week. He was ruled out on Friday. He wasn't even a game-time decision. So now you're playing just 4 or 5 days later. He was going to be questionable game-time decision at best for the Steelers game. There was no guarantee he was going to play anyway. Not that big of a deal for me. I'm throwing that out there. I would love to have Brandon Williams out there. He's very essential to the run defense. The run defense is not holding up too well as of late. Let's talk about this Titans game where we're looking too far ahead, but it's only natural. As far as this Titans game, the big matchup coming in, just talked about the Ravens' run defense, stopping Derrick Henry. That's everything. That's the only thing people were talking about going into this game. Stopping Derrick Henry. We know what he did in that playoff game. He ran wild on this defense. The Ravens made offseason moves to, not just to make sure that they could beat the Titans because, look, the Titans, yes, they were going to show up on the Ravens' schedule this year, but they're not a division opponent. But the Ravens didn't make the Calais Campbell move, the Derek Wolfe move. They didn't make those just because of the Titans. It just so happened that the Titans were the team that made them say, hey, we really got to work on our run defense and make sure that it's completely locked down. So it sucks that you were missing two of your best run stuffers going into this matchup because I said that I would have been really excited to see how this Ravens defense at full force with Calais Campbell, Derek Wolfe, and Brandon Williams manning that defensive line would be able to handle Derrick Henry, who's having just yet another outstanding season. But we get into the game, and Derrick Henry's not getting completely shut down. He's getting his 3, 4 yards, 5 yards a pop sometimes. He's having an okay day. He's able to run the ball. But the Ravens, I don't know how to word this. The Ravens defense was, I guess, holding their own. They were finding a way to get off the field. That's for sure. I'll say that much. Whether that was the Titans just deciding to not stick with Derrick Henry early and often and throw the ball more, whatever the situation was, all I know is the Ravens had the Titans in a lot of 3rd and long situations, 3rd and 7, 8, maybe more, some 3rd and shorts, but they found a way to get off the field. And you got to give them credit for that. They definitely broke down towards the end of the game. I'll say that much. But as far as this ragtag defensive line going up against Derrick Henry, if you look at the box score, Derrick Henry had a monster game. But if you were someone watching this game closely, I don't know how your takeaway can't be anything but the defense did a pretty decent job against Derrick Henry.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been one of the really frustrating things about the Ravens is even in their wins, some of their wins, they just have not been consistent in putting 4 quarters of solid football together at a time. And that was clearly the case when they had Derrick Henry stopped. You know, I think I have the stats down written here. He had 36 yards after halftime, 96 at the end of regulation, 133 yards at the final. So that just tells you, whether it's a combination of things, because along with the defense just melting down and, the offense in overtime, they have to punt the ball towards the end of the game too. They really weren't, they weren't keeping pace up with as much as they were, as much as the Titans were. So you look at all these things together and the Ravens it's been such a struggle for them last year, just completely dismantling teams left and right. And you're looking at it this year, they just haven't been able to do the same thing with the same consistency.
Right. So this is my issue with, the defense stopping Derrick Henry, because could it have been better? Yes. Would you, have liked to have seen him, get stopped there at the end of the game and maybe you force them to kick a field goal in an attempt to win instead of just having Derrick Henry walk almost untouched into the end zone for the game winner? Yes. But my biggest gripe is, especially in this game, without Calais Campbell, without Brandon Williams, the fact that the defense was holding Derrick Henry to where he was in the first half, early second half. They were getting stops. They were getting off the field, like I said. My biggest complaint is the offense gets the ball back after the defense just forced a punt, got a turnover earlier in the game, or forced a field goal after it looked like the Titans were going to march down for an easy touchdown. They stop them in the red zone and force a field goal. So many drives ended that way. The defense was, holding their own. For as many injuries as they have suffered, the fact that they were getting these stops or turning what could have been a touchdown into a field goal attempt, that was huge, and the offense did nothing with it. Nothing. Look at the interception in the first half. The Ravens, the game looked like early on it could have gotten ugly. Ravens start with a 3-and-out. Titans start with a touchdown where they just march down the field with ease. I'm sitting there saying this could get ugly, very ugly. And the Ravens defense forces a turnover. Patrick Queen comes through untouched, forces a bad throw, and Tyus Bowser gets the interception, sets the Ravens offense up well inside Titans territory, and they can only get a field goal out of that. That's unacceptable. It just can't happen. When your defense is just, they're scrapping and clawing on every single play just to try to maintain an advantage here, because they're going up against Derrick Henry, and it's not just Derrick Henry, really. This Titans offense as a whole is really talented. If we want to talk about Ryan Tannehill's improvement through his career, where he's at in 2020 versus where he was just a couple years ago, it's astonishing. That guy's balling out this year, and really it gets lost in, behind Derrick Henry and how great he is. But Ryan Tannehill's having a great year. That should be noted. But if your defense is getting stops like that and the offense isn't turning it into anything, that's unacceptable. It can't happen. So that's my biggest gripe, is that we get late into the game and, the defense breaks down and they start looking silly and they can't tackle, and that sucks because it's, you're in a position to still win the game. But as far as I'm concerned, this game should have been over earlier in the game. The defense was getting stops. The offense was, they scored one touchdown at the beginning of the second half. Beautiful pass from Lamar to Mark Andrews. You go up 11 at that point. I think the defense got another stop after that, or at least held them to a field goal. The offense should have put the game away right there, late in the third quarter, early in the fourth quarter. Run the clock out, put points on the board, at least match their field goal. No, what do? They end up punting. Lamar has another interception. It's ridiculous. This game should have been over way, way earlier. And the fact that it got drawn out to the end of regulation and the offense had another chance to win the game at the end of regulation, they're marching down the field, and then they stall out and they have to kick a tying field goal. That's what's frustrating to me. The defense, at the end of the day, it wasn't their best effort by far. I'm not going to sit here and tell you the defense had a great game, but they did enough, and they did their job early and often.
Yeah, and it's you're talking about the offense too. I mean, I know what I wrote down is Lamar. I know the Lions certainly face its injuries this year, but in overtime on second down, you just can't take that sack. I mean, it was probably, I think it was like 8 or so yards that they lost on that play, just a massive thing to overcome. And then I think they had like a 3rd and 17 type situation after that. It was something like that. It's just been a consistency problem dating back to the Titans game in the playoffs last year. I mean, I don't know if you were planning on getting into what we saw before the game, with like the whole interaction between like Harbaugh and Malcolm Butler and all, Mike Vrabel getting involved, and then Harbaugh, like, I guess my thought process on that whole thing, it was just strange all around. Like the whole situation was just strange. Like, was Harbaugh trying to fire up the team or something by, just going out there and defending the shield or whatever? Because if so, it didn't work, because the Ravens, I think they punted on their first series, and then the Titans went right down and scored a touchdown. And I just don't get like the post game stuff either. Like, just shake the guy's hand after the game. It would just be a good sport about it. Like I just found it strange in a way that the Ravens were not so fired up, I guess would be the right way to say it, after all this happened. Like, it just kind of seemed like, okay, this happened. Our coach just, got into the face of some of the opposing players, or big name player too, and Malcolm Butler. And I think AJ Brown was in the middle of it there. And really, it just seemed like the Ravens didn't really fight back that much from the whole thing.
So I probably have a pretty boring take on this, but
probably,
in my opinion, this is really getting like blown out of proportion. For starters, you look at the situation that this happened, or when did this happen? The Titans come out of the tunnel before the Ravens do. So they come out of the tunnel and they immediately go to the midfield logo, and they're having their little pregame hype up, whatever. They did it in the playoff game as well. I believe, I don't know if it was Jonas Schaefer or Aaron Kassanitz, one of the Ravens beat writers shared a picture that they had saved from the playoff game. The Titans did the same thing. They ran out of the tunnel first. And of course, at that time, it was a packed, stadium that was extremely hyped up for the playoff game. The smoke's going, the Ravens are about to come running out of the tunnel. So in that situation, they gather at midfield and they're like, look, we're the massive underdog here. I get that. That makes sense. So it obviously, we know how that game worked out for them. So they come in this year, no fans in the stands, day game, significantly less daunting, I'll say that. But why not do the same thing? So they did the same thing, and there were no Ravens players on the sideline at the time. That should be noted, because the one thing I keep hearing is, oh, how come Harbaugh had to go out there by himself and no one backed him up? Well, every Ravens player was standing in the tunnel waiting to come out, so that's why. There was just other coaches on the sideline besides Harbaugh. And one last thing, this probably will never be answered because we don't have a full video of it, and Harbaugh will never say anything. The players will never say anything. But my guess is Harbaugh doesn't have a problem with them standing on the midfield logo. He has a problem when Malcolm Butler or whoever else starts yelling at the Ravens sideline and yelling at the coaches and starts trash talking. Then he walks out on the field. That's my guess. Again, I think it's a pretty strong guess. I don't think Harbaugh is the type to get, bent out of shape because the opposing team is standing on the midfield logo. It's a football field. It's whatever. Apparently
the Titans do it like no matter where they are, but isn't that kind of like rare for an NFL team to do that? Like doesn't that seem like you would hear like a college team doing, like is meeting at midfield on the other team's turf before a game? Like, doesn't that just seem rare for an NFL team to do?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not commonplace, but at the end of the day, it's really not a big deal. And maybe it's a big deal to some people, but to go back to Harbaugh, I don't think he's the type of person that gets bent out of shape about that. I'm pretty sure he only went onto the field because Butler or whoever was staring them down and started barking. And then he goes on the field, Vrabel comes out, they exchange words. It's really, it happened. It's a non-story. The fact that it happened before the game, I can agree in some respects that it should have, fueled the team a little bit more. But in the moment, I think a lot is being lost in the fact that, we don't have the full context. And then as far as the handshake, I believe Harbaugh was claiming they did shake hands. Maybe it happened after the cameras got off of that weird exchange they had where they were seemingly walking towards each other, and then Harbaugh like waved his hand down and was like, get out of here. I don't want to shake your hand. I don't know
It's
what.
hard to see anything for sure though because they're wearing their masks.
Right.
You can't see.
But just the body language, it did look like Harbaugh was blowing him off. But he claimed after the game they did shake hands, so maybe it happened after the cameras cut. I don't know. It's not a huge deal to me. Like, I'm not mad at the team for not being more fired up about it. There's way bigger problems for this team right now, but I don't know. It was worth mentioning because I guess in some ways maybe this Ravens-Titans matchup is it was a big rivalry back in the day. That was Ravens-Steelers before Ravens-Steelers. Ravens-Titans was that ferocious and that heated. So maybe, they're not a division opponent anymore, but maybe the Titans start becoming if they're going to be competitive every year, maybe this becomes a little side rivalry for the Ravens.
Well, yeah, and you talked about. I do think it's extremely possible that the factor. I mean, for us watching on TV, they pump in the crowd noise. It's hard to really tell a difference. We can't see what the stadium actually looks like half the time. But I think not having any fans there to boo the Titans as this was all going on might have actually played a factor. I mean, Lamar probably knew something about it. I don't know if I believe everything that he said, he knew nothing about it whatsoever after the game. I'm sure at least some conversation was had on the sidelines about it, but you're right. The players probably didn't know much about it until they went online on social media after the game and looked at it. So not having fans there very much could have played a key thing in that, which you look at Thursday night and the Steelers are going to have, I think 5,500 people in attendance for the Thanksgiving night game. But after December 6th, according to the Pennsylvania legislation, I don't think they'll be able to. So, and it's kind of funny from somebody that lives, from us, our point of views, we live in Pennsylvania. We're above the Maryland line. So it's kind of funny to me to see how different states are, they have all these different rules. It's just, it's just strange, because it creates such I know 5,500 fans isn't the biggest difference in the world, but it's definitely something that's more noticeable than not having anybody in the stadium, period. So I just don't understand why the NFL hasn't done more to make that more of a level playing field. But, it's not like there's a full stadium anywhere, but just kind of strange and ironic to see how different the states are in handling it.
Yeah, I'm going to have to call up Tom Wolfe today and tell him that we can't have fans going to Steelers games.
Well, the virus can't, I don't know if you heard, Nolan, the virus doesn't affect Steelers fans or the city of Pittsburgh until after December 6th. So right now they can have fans in attendance.
Yes.
In case, that's what I heard.
Very important distinction. So yeah, that's one last thing. I mean, we were talking about the players being energized and fired up, and this didn't happen early in the game. I think it happened in the second half, but something that really needs to be pointed out here because my goodness, and especially if the Ravens won this game, this would have been a bigger talking point or something that would have been celebrated more. But DeShon Elliott and his hit on Derrick Henry in the second half that knocked him out for a couple plays, that was wow. In the moment, you immediately see that happen. If anyone's going to hit someone that hard on this Ravens defense, it's going to be DeShon Elliott. And for him, just one-on-one, to stop Derrick Henry like that and then to stand over him. I like that too, to stand over him and look down at him. I loved all of it. Immediately everyone starts going back to Earl Thomas in the postseason and him getting stiff-armed into oblivion and almost to the point where he gets turned around and now he's blocking for Derrick Henry as he's running downfield. So the contrast between Earl Thomas, who, again, we're not going to talk about him too much here because he's not a Raven anymore. It doesn't matter. That's history at this point. But, that play happened against the same player, and I don't know. It's very much a comparison that should be made, and I think it's, we didn't need this hit to tell us that was the difference between Earl Thomas and DeShon Elliott. If you've seen either of them play football, this is no slight to Earl, by the way. It's just that's DeShon's style and that's Earl's style. Earl, at this point in his career, is not a hitter anymore. And also just thankful that DeShon didn't go so hard that he hurt himself on that play, because sometimes I think he's a guy that's, willing to sacrifice his own body just for a big hit.
Yeah, I mean, I remember which play you're talking about exactly, but I didn't think to make the comparison between that play and what happened with Earl Thomas last year. But that is kind of funny now that you think about it like that. Earl Thomas, obviously the wily veteran who has all the experience and was a big hitter. People said he's a future Hall of Famer based on what he did in Seattle. I don't know if I'm ready to say that, but he was a Hall of very good, definitely. I don't know if I'm putting him in the Hall of Fame, especially now that he isn't on a team period right now. But yeah, to see that, and you're right with DeShon Elliott also having a history of getting hurt. You don't know if 2 years ago when he's a rookie and his body still is not fully adjusted to the NFL, if he's getting up from that hit. But especially when you consider how big Derrick Henry is too, that's very impressive. And the defense, like we said, overall great performance until the fourth quarter, and it's just unfortunate that along with that, the offense just seemed to hit a bump and couldn't get anything going after a certain point, and the Titans caught up, and even though the Ravens were trailing for much of the game, or they were leading for almost the entire game, that's what doomed them is the defense, Derrick Henry coming alive against everybody, and the offense just slowing down.
All right, let's get more in depth with the offense here. Inconsistency is the word of the week. It's been the word of the week for a while now. I think you alluded to that this has been an issue pretty much for the entire year, is the inconsistencies. And it started right from the get-go. Like I said, you go 3 and out. Then we're only able to manage a field goal in the next 2 drives, despite, the defense setting you up in Titans territory off the Bowser interception. You only get a field goal out of that. It just can't happen. You got to get a touchdown there, and it's just way too inconsistent. So there's so much that I could get on the Ravens offense here for. I'm going to try to keep it concise, but from week to week, it could be one thing could stand out as the biggest issue, but for the most part, it's usually a culmination of all these things. You've got drops. Hollywood Brown, my goodness, one of the ugliest drops I've ever seen. He's wide open in the middle of the field, just lets it bounce off his hands. Penalties, that's been an issue the entire year. Whether you think the refs have a bias against the Ravens or not, and we might be able to have time to get into that a little bit later. Just the offensive line has shot itself in the foot way too many times. Silver lining in this one, no illegal formation penalty in this game, if that matters to you. It mattered to me, I'll say that much. I was pleasantly surprised, but still, penalties, holding, false start, getting big plays called back because of a stupid penalty. Lamar going on the QB sneak on a 3rd and short in the second half gets called back because Mark Andrews jumped on a false start. Sticking with the offensive line, in addition to that, poor pass protection. It's not something that, thankfully, they do a pretty decent job of keeping Lamar upright for the entire game as a whole. But in my opinion, it seems that when it's a crucial down and a clear pass rush down for the opponent, they can't stop them. They can't, and they can't even contain them. Like, they can't even, with the fact that you have a mobile quarterback, you should at the very least be able to go into that play saying, they're going to send the house here, Lamar. We're going to do our best to stop them, but just be ready to roll out. And we have a play drawn up here that's designed for Lamar to get out of the pocket. That's what you should be drawing up in that scenario with this ragtag offensive line. But we saw it there in overtime. It was only second down, but still at that field position and everything, great time to dial up a blitz. And the offensive line was just a revolving door. I mean, Lamar didn't even have time to get out of the pocket. It's ridiculous. So poor pass protection at the worst times is my big gripe there. It's not like they're a revolving door the entire game, but when it matters most, they really can't stop a nosebleed. And the list, it goes on and on and on. Like, it's something different every week. But like I said, for the most part, it's at least some combination of those things. And don't exclude Lamar from that conversation. He's had his bad moments. Another terrible interception in this game, a ball that should have never been thrown. Just when you're looking at the game situation, up 11, I believe, or up 8, moving the ball pretty well. Why take a deep shot there? Why do it? There's no need. Pound the ball. If you're going to run a pass play there and you see you have Duvernay deep, don't even make that throw. Just check it down to somebody. Dez, I don't know, whoever was on a short route, or throw it out of bounds. Don't take a deep shot there unless he's blatantly wide open and no one's covering him. If that's buying into the whole Lamar can't throw deep or Lamar can't throw outside the numbers narrative, whatever, you can take that as you will. But I'm just looking specifically at the game situation with the lead you had, and the offense was, up until that point, they were moving the ball decently well on that drive. They were getting into Titans territory. You should have at the very least been able to match them with a field goal on that drive, but you turn it over. And now the Titans are right back in the game. So I don't know, man. It's so frustrating, and like I said, there's no one thing I can point to. Inconsistency is the go-to word, and I guess the big takeaway is that this offense, just not to compare them to last year, because I'm really not doing that. I'm comparing them to the average NFL offense. They just don't have that spark. They don't have that, I don't know what it is, whatever word you want to use. When it's late in the game, look no further than this game. They had a chance to win it after the Titans had the go-ahead score. The Ravens still had a couple timeouts and well over a minute to go down the field. And they did. They got themselves in the red zone and they stalled out. So they just lack that little oomph, that one little spark that is the difference, at least at the end of this game, between stalling out and kicking a field goal and punching it in and winning the game. That's what they lack. They don't have that in them this year, and I don't know why.
And two big questions I had, watching the offense on Sunday is like, I understand J.K. Dobbins still played the majority of the snaps. He was in there for 63, around that percent of them, I believe, but they were still taking him out at strange times. I don't understand, this guy's getting hot. I know he's not lighting the world on fire like Derrick Henry was late in the game, but he's quick. He's got a lot of burst. He can juke really well. He's shifty. So why are they taking him out? Why do they continue to think that this is a running back by committee type thing? And I know Ingram only played 6 snaps and Edwards only carried it 3 times. Dobbins was clearly the number one there, but just stick with it. And obviously, now on Thursday night, they're not even going to have Dobbins. And Jeff Streebach's tweeting that the Ravens learned this morning of more positive COVID cases. So God only knows what's going to happen, today with that situation. But the other question I had was, Hollywood Brown, it's becoming more and more clear that he's not a number one, but particularly he's not a guy that goes over against, big physical cornerbacks and out jumps them, gets more physical than them, outplays them, out jumps them for balls, because he just doesn't have the size. So why are they continuing to keep him on the outside? Put him in the slot more. And then the frustrating thing is when you do actually put him in the slot and you throw it to him, he drops it. So it's not just a coaching thing. It's not just a play calling thing of where they're lining him up. It's also Hollywood Brown executing. And Lamar hasn't been the most accurate in the world and had a shot with Hollywood Brown in this game in the end zone, but was just overthrown. And even if it was placed perfectly, the defender was right there, because Hollywood Brown, again, isn't getting the separation that we've all been expecting. So it's a number of factors going into it.
So I had a couple things based on what you said. I'll start with Dobbins. And I agree. Look, I mean, hey, if you can transition him at this point in the season into being the feature back, I'm all for that. I've supported the committee in the past, but at this point, Ingram just isn't getting it done. It's a clear distinction. They're all 3 of them, Ingram, Dobbins, Edwards, they're all running behind the same offensive line. So I don't want to hear the excuse that the offensive line isn't as good as last year. Ingram's getting 1 to 2 yards a pop. Edwards is getting way more than that, just being a same, physical styled runner. And then Dobbins is being he's a different style, but he's getting even more yards because as a rookie, he's showing me a lot. Dobbins is, to be a rookie, to not have a formal training camp, a formal preseason, any of that stuff, for him to come in and be able to find these rushing lanes at the NFL level and put moves on NFL linebackers and turn 3-yard gains into 5-yard gains, I'm extremely impressed. And then on top of that, we've seen the flashes that he's shown catching passes very, very occasionally. It's all great. It's all great upside. And, I think after the draft pick was made, we knew the writing was on the wall and he was going to be that Ingram was going to be out and next year it was going to be all about Dobbins. But the fact that we're, at least at this point in the season, that's not just speculation. We're confident in it because we're seeing Dobbins play and we're seeing him produce really well. It's one thing to say, oh, we drafted this guy, he's going to be good, he's the future. But when you see him go out there and actually do it, despite all of the circumstances that are working against him this year with all the COVID stuff, for him to still perform, that makes you feel even more confident. So I'm all in on Dobbins, but there's one thing that I've been hearing about him, this rumor, they don't have him out there on passing downs, and this probably goes back to why you haven't seen him catch many passes out of the backfield despite being a dual threat running back with that kind of skill set. They don't have him on passing downs because he can't block. They need him to be a better pass protector. That's huge. I think that would clearly explain why he's not out there on certain snaps. But again, at this point in his career, I think you can have nothing but excitement and happiness with the way he's playing.
And one last thing too on Dobbins, doesn't the way that certainly the fact that he wears the same number as a very popular former Ravens running back used to wear, with the way he moves and his speed and the way he looks in the uniform, doesn't he remind you a lot of Ray Rice, at least like when he moves?
Oh yeah. I heard people were saying that when he got drafted, that he's that style of running back, but I don't watch much college football. I didn't see him play much at Ohio State, but we saw it in this game. He finds the good rushing lane. Ray Rice did that very well. And then when he gets to the linebackers, when he gets to that past the defensive front, he's able to I don't know what it is, his size. We always talked about that with Ray Rice, that his being at such a short stature, he had such a low center of gravity that a linebacker would get a hand on him and try to bring him down, and he could stay balanced and stay up. So I'm seeing the same thing out of Dobbins. And yeah, like I said, the future is very bright for him. And as far as Hollywood, real quick, last week I kind of defended him. I said the same thing you did. They need to utilize him better. Having him outside exclusively it's crippling him. It's not utilizing his skill set. But this drop early in this game, he only got 2 targets after that, but the drop is the drop. There's no excuse for it. And it's a two-way street. You can be someone like me who is clamoring for him to be utilized better and have special plays drawn up for him. But if you can't do the easy things and you can't do the bare minimum and catch the ball when you're wide open, I don't know what to tell you. There's no excuse, like I said. So we'll move on. Last thing on the offense, you mentioned it, Des Bryant, much more involved this week. Gets called up as a COVID replacement. Very well could play again this week. I would probably expect that, especially considering how involved he was against the Titans. I would expect him to be involved again on Thursday night. Pleasantly surprised. That's my big takeaway. If you've been listening to the podcast this season, the expectations from myself and Jake as well, they weren't high. We weren't clamoring for him to get called up as soon as he got signed because we knew that it was going to be an uphill battle. So even though he only saw little short, quick screen or check down passes, for him to turn those little screen passes into 4 or 5 yard gains, good for him. And then he had one at the end of regulation. It was a check down pass or a short route, and he gets to the sideline and turns that, instead of a little 4 or 5 yard gain, turns that into a 14-yard, 15-yard gain. So nice little game for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very curious too to see. Obviously with everything going on, and it's hard to even tell right now what's going on with it. We don't know who these second round of testing that Jeff's talking about on Twitter. We don't know who's impacted, if it's coaches, if it's people in the organization, or if it's players. But obviously, the more and more people on the roster that it's getting, you're obviously already kind of handicapped as far as running backs go on Thursday. But you would hate to see a lot more come forward, and it's kind of tough. Like I'm curious, like thinking big picture here. Are you almost at a point where, you think about what the Ravens need. On offense, they need linemen, they need tight ends, they need receivers. And they look on the defensive side of the ball, they should probably draft a pass rusher. They should probably draft another defensive back, a corner, especially after what we've seen from the injuries this year. And I don't think the Ravens have many picks this coming draft. So with all these factors going in, and who's to say, I know it's frustrating because Lamar's on his rookie contract, and this is the time to bring in as much talent as you can and try to go for it. But like, it's hard right now to not hope that the Ravens lose a couple of these games and increase their draft positioning in the first round, so they can maybe try to restock in some of these areas that, yes, could bounce back with all of the injuries, but the guys like Tavon Young, who's been hurt all the time, and Nick Boyle comes back, and that's a pretty serious knee injury he's going to be coming back from. I don't know if he's going to be the exact same player he was, kind of like Skura this year, not to Skura's extent. And playing center is obviously playing different than tight end, but with all of the challenges and all of the hurdles the Ravens are facing right now, like, I'm having a hard time escaping that mindset. Nolan, can you talk me out of it?
I can't talk you off the ledge. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, that's why we didn't choose psychology or whatever as our field of study.
It's not good. It's not a good situation. The injuries are mounting up. I will say, with the offensive line they fielded on Sunday, they moved Matt Skura out of the center position. They put Pat McCary in there. Looked like the snaps were all right. As far as pass protection, pretty decent for the entire game, but they were very suspect when it mattered most.
And that was against the banged up Titans defensive front seven too. They've got to play Pittsburgh Thursday night.
That's the thing. Like I said, it was where they really looked bad was on clear blitzing down. So, it's not like they were getting beat the entire game. I think that's a good enough sign. And then the run game too, if we want to talk about this, without Nick Boyle, that was a huge concern this week. How is the run game going to fare without your most essential run blocking player? Offensive lineman, tight end, whatever. He's just the most essential. Dobbins to get 70 yards on 15 carries. Just under 5 yards a pop. That's pretty good. Gus only got 3 carries for 6 yards. Had Dobbins not been that red hot, I guess Gus Edwards would have gotten more touches. And then Ingram, obviously, after his 2 early touches was out. He only got a yard on each one. So, I thought run blocking was pretty good, all things considered, and hopefully a sign that they're able to hold up somewhat decently throughout the rest of the year without their best blockers. No Ronnie Stanley, Nick Boyle. It's an uphill battle every week when you're talking about pass protection and run blocking. So I don't know, man. It's the situation they're in. It's next man up, and they all we can do now is look ahead. And we already talked a good bit about what's going to go into the Steelers game, the COVID tests and everything. And Jeff Zrebiec, like you said, is reporting there's more today. I'm trying to read the tweet again because I don't know if the language would indicate that it's players.
I don't think their name. If there are more players, I don't think their names will be released. I think it's at 4 p.m. when that happens. But the Ravens are doing everything virtually today. I don't believe they're practicing, and there's no media availability because of all of this. So
it's this. I don't know. I said earlier in the show before I learned this that if you could keep it to just those 3 guys, Dobbins, Ingram, and Williams, that's pretty good. You'll take that. It sucks, but to only have 3 guys, that's something you can overcome. But now we don't know how many it can be. Just with this information alone, and we're going to assume that the NFL still isn't going to move this game, although I don't know. They were quick to say we're not going to move the game after the news yesterday, but now we have this additional news and it's Tuesday. And once again, this is a Thursday game. So look, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you what the NFL is going to do, but they've got a tough decision on their hands, that's for sure. And we'll just have to see. I mean, I would think that it's not impossible for this game to get moved to Sunday. I know everyone's saying, they're not going to move the game, you idiot. It's a primetime game. There's too much money. It's like, we saw the NFL play a Tuesday game earlier this year. Look, anything is on the table. I'll just say that. In this 2020 COVID season, nothing is off limits. I know networks and TV networks and all that plays a factor, but there was a Monday night doubleheaders earlier this year where CBS got a Monday night game that was overlapping with the start of the ESPN game. You think ESPN was happy about that? No, they expect to be the exclusive football game on Monday night. And at the very least, if you're going to have two games, the first one should stop before the second one starts. But there was overlap. ESPN was probably pissed off about that. What do you think the NFL did? They said, hey, too bad. Here's a little check. Deal with it. To say that the networks have that much control over what the NFL is going to do with their schedule, you're an idiot for saying that. So I'm sorry. If they need to move this game, they'll move the game. Make no mistake about it. So to sit here and say that the game's not getting moved and the Ravens are just going to have to put up with it and the NFL is going to have to put up with it because the network's not going to give up that Thanksgiving night game. I'm sorry. They'll do whatever it takes. They have to. Enough of that. As far as the matchup goes, look, I'll just get right to the chase. I'm picking the Steelers in this one. I just cannot confidently pick the Ravens with all this COVID stuff. Even without this COVID nonsense, we knew it was going to be a tough game, but I might, in that situation, pick the Ravens with their back against the wall, season on the line, because I'm going to call this a must-win game, but it's not a fun must-win game. Wouldn't it be great if this was a must-win game, but the Ravens were 1 or 2 games back in the division, and you're saying, oh, man, this is for the division. That's a fun must-win game. No, this is a must-win game, and it's not even fun because they're out of the division. So you win this game, hey, we beat the Steelers on Thanksgiving. That's cool, but we're still not winning the division. So it just sucks. So still a must-win game in my mind. You cannot fall to 5 losses before the calendar turns to December. I don't care how easy their schedule is down the stretch. And I don't know. I mean, look, if you want to get into the nitty-gritty and the X's and O's, we can. But for me, it's just simple. Short week, on the road, this COVID stuff. The Steelers are a great team. This all just adds up to a loss. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible for the Ravens to win. I think it'll be a close game. If anything, I actually think we see a defensive battle here. I think the score I wrote down is 21-17. Even with a banged-up defensive line, I think the Ravens' defense will be able to contain Pittsburgh. They actually don't, I don't know, I could be talking out of my ass here. They don't run as much as they should, in my opinion. And look, they have good success with Big Ben and those receivers through the air, but the Ravens' secondary is at full strength right now. Again, barring, we don't know who the positive tests are. Could be Marlon Humphrey, could be Jimmy Smith, could be Marcus Peters. We don't know. So, safe bet. I'm picking the Steelers, 21-17. Where are you at, Jake, with this matchup?
Don't disagree with too much of what you just said. I'm going with Pittsburgh as well. I do believe, it is very possible for this game with everything the Ravens have going on right now to turn into an ugly one. I don't think it's going to be too much of a big margin, but I do think with everything happening, and of course, if there are more positive COVID tests that are revealed after we're finished recording here, that yes, it could turn into a very ugly game. But as I said earlier, in case it is an ugly game, if you're like me and turkey makes you sleepy, and you've already also might have had some alcohol on your Thanksgiving, maybe that's factored into the equation as well. But if all that has happened to you and you cannot stay awake by the time it is 8:30, and this does in fact turn into an ugly game, then it's okay, because you can just drift off into your post-Thanksgiving dinner slumber and forget all of the problems about the Ravens. But I'm going 30-21 Steelers.
The Ravens are a team, in a position to get healthy at the right time, get hot at the right time. Yes, the opponents beating some of these teams down the stretch isn't going to give you much, overarching confidence in this team. But look, you want to draw parallels to 2012, the Super Bowl run. They got hot at the right time, and they won some very improbable games. But we know if they make the postseason this year, they're going to have to go on the road. Does home field advantage matter as much this year in the COVID 2020 season? Probably not. You'll have some fans in some stadiums, but it's not the usual deafening, loud crowd that you're going to face as a road opponent in the postseason. The only thing I have my fingers crossed for as a Ravens fan right now is just get healthy and eliminate this COVID stuff. No more, close contacts, having guys miss out because of close contacts, having guys miss out because they test positive. There's only, so much you can do, and I believe the Ravens are following all the protocols they can and doing the best they can, but can we please enough? Because the Ravens have already been through enough of that this year. But on top of that, is Jimmy Smith 100% down the stretch and going into the postseason? That's important. When do you get Calais Campbell back? When do you get Brandon Williams back? Get those guys to 100%. I think you maintain a good health around the rest of the team. Tyree Phillips, we didn't even talk about that. He could be coming back to play on Thursday. But the short week, there's a lot of questions there, but I believe he was taken off IR, so he's a candidate to play. I know he's just a rookie, but he was a starter earlier this year, so that's huge to have him back just from a depth standpoint because you've had so much offensive line shuffling. My point is that, this team's focus right now should be to get healthy and then roll into the postseason as a healthy team because you look around the NFL, yes, there's better teams than the Ravens, clearly, but there's some teams that are really riddled with injuries right now at key positions. If they can be healthy, I think that's an advantage they can hold over a potential playoff opponent. And with that, we'll wrap up episode 129. I want to thank everyone, as always, for listening. Continue to spread the word. Tell a family member, tell a friend, tell a coworker, whoever it is that is a Ravens fan. Check out the podcast. They ask, where can I listen? Look, you already know the answer. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, that's where you can find the podcast. YouTube, SoundCloud, Apple, Spotify. We're everywhere. And one last thing, hey, everyone enjoy your Thanksgiving as much as possible. If the Ravens end up playing their game on Thursday night, enjoy the game, and we appreciate you listening as always. We will be here, same time, same place, next week, talking about the Steelers game and probably a whole lot more.